guys much better. Anyways, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name's Shelly, and basically in this video I'm going over my April, May, and June reading wrap up. I can't believe that it's already halfway into the year. I feel like time's just going by so fast, but it's summertime, the weather's nice. We're actually experiencing a heat wave right now. We had rainstorms for the last 2 weeks, and now starting this week the weather's all in the 30s, and I love that because I'm off for the next few days. I'm gonna be enjoying the sun after I film this video. And if you haven't watched my first quarter wrap up of 2024, I'll link it somewhere up here. That is my January, February, and March reading wrap up. Anyways, let's get into talking about these books. So for the month of April, I read 11 books. I DNF'd 2 books. There were 4 romance books, 6 thrillers / murder mysteries, and 4 fantasy books. The first book is The Fine Print. This is actually the first book that I DNF'd in the month of April. I know I've heard a lot of things about this book, but while I was reading, I just wasn't feeling it. So I chose to soft DNF it. Like, I'm not DNFing it forever. I'm definitely gonna come back to this book because there's a lot of hype around this book. If you don't already know, this book is the first book in the Billionaire Land series. There's 3 books in the series, and it's about the different brothers who inherit businesses from their late grandfather. This first book is about Rowan and Zara. Rowan inherited the Dreamland theme park from the grandfather, and he's currently revamping it, renovating it, and making it better for the public. But then he hires Zara to come work for him. Zara describes him as the most difficult person you can work with. One night they accidentally kiss and things spiral on from there. I think they hate each other at first. It's kind of giving enemies to lovers. Yeah, that's the first book that I DNF'd. The second book is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I absolutely loved this book. If you don't already know, this book is about Olive and Ethan. Olive's sister is getting married, and Ethan is the groom's best man. Up until the reception, everything was perfect, but then when the food came out, everyone ended up getting food poisoning except for Olive and Ethan. Olive, I think, is like a vegetarian, and Ethan's just picky with food. He doesn't like buffet food because he's just a germaphobe. So there's this all paid for trip to Hawaii that was supposed to be for the bride and the groom for their honeymoon, but they can't go because they're both sick. So Olive and Ethan decide to take it up, and there's a little bit of fake dating in here once they get to Maui, and it's definitely enemies to lovers. They hated each other at first, and then, you know, things happen in Hawaii, and I absolutely love this book. I gave it 5 stars. It's a very like lighthearted rom-com. It's easy to read. Everything just flew by. The text is pretty big and it's funny. I found myself laughing and grinning and being giddy in this book. And it was just an overall good read. Okay, so the next book I read was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I absolutely loved The 7-Year Slip. I gave it a 6 star. That's why I was so excited to read this one. If you don't already know, this one is about Lawrence, who is a ghostwriter for this very popular author, and she's currently on a contract to write 3 more books for this author, but then she hits a writer's block for her last novel she's supposed to write, and also the time where she gets a new editor who is described as a too handsome mountain of a man who won't give her an extension on her book deadline. So that's one problem, but then things happen in her personal life. Her father passes away and she has to go back to her hometown to kind of help with the funeral and with the family business. Just a little bit about her. Florence can see ghosts. She and her dad can, the rest of the family can, so they like have this third eye. She grew up seeing ghosts, but then I think it kind of drove her away from this little town that they were living in to a bigger town to kind of pursue what she wanted to be, a writer and all that. So when she comes back home arranging the funeral, she sees this ghost who she describes as a broad and infuriatingly handsome man. And to be honest, I was like a little skeptical about this, the main character falling in love with a ghost. That's kind of weird, and I rated this a 4 star. It was just not giving like the 5-star feelings that I got from The 5-Year Slip. It was a little bit slower in the beginning to the middle, almost to the end. I found myself kind of predicting what was going to happen from the very beginning, which I did in The 7-Year Slip, but read with an open mind because it was the journey of reading throughout the book that I loved during The 7-Year Slip. This book is not your typical love story like I mentioned because there's ghosts, but it's more about grief and how she dealt with grief of losing her father and just how like her life is changing and all that. And yeah, it had more of a deeper meaning, which I love about Ashley Poston's books. Usually hits the right spot and makes me cry. So I rated this a 4 star. I feel like I'm sitting like this and hunched over. The next book I read is The House Made by Frida McFadden. I know this is a very popular thriller book among the book community, so I was very excited to read it. If you don't know what the book is about, it's about Cecilia, who is basically homeless, lives in her car, doesn't have much in life until she gets hired as a living help for the Winchester family. Gets hired by Nina Winchester, who is the wife, and she was like great during the interview. She seemed like a normal person until Cecilia moved in. She put Cecilia in this attic room that just like has this one small window and the door locks from the outside, so that was already a big red flag. I would have run out of there or asked for a different room because the house was massive. It's basically a mansion, but she was put up there. And let me tell you, Nina, I did not like her. There's a lot of red flags. She was the queen of gaslighting. She was lying about everything. But then she meets the husband, Andrew Winchester, and they kind of get close, too close, and things started to unravel. I can't tell you more because I feel like it's gonna ruin it, but it was I did not see that plot twist. What I liked about the book was it was fast paced. Something was going on in every chapter. The chapters left you in a cliffhanger, so you just wanted to read until it was over. The ending was like a little bit disappointing for me because it felt like it was just an ending that was convenient for everyone. It kind of worked out for everyone, and I didn't like that. You built up this much suspense throughout the book, and the ending was meh. But I liked it. I loved it. It got me out of a reading slump. The next book is One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. This book was really not it for me. If you don't know, this is about a group of students who get sent to detention together, but then something happens in detention. One of them ends up dying, so they're all suspects to this murder. It moves point of views between the different characters, and I just found it really slow. It's just kind of talking about the day-to-day lives of the characters, and then near the end their secrets started to spill out, and it was pretty predictable. So I rated this at 2.5 stars. The next book I read is The Silent Patient. This book boggled my mind and messed with me a little bit, and it's a psychological thriller. So this book is about Alice and Theo. Alice is a patient in a mental institution. She basically was convicted of murder after shooting her husband, and after that she just doesn't say a word ever. Theo thinks that he can get through to her and just let her tell her side of the story, but then things kind of take a weird turn. Like, she does end up kind of communicating with him. It was a lot. Like, I was like, what? This was a real psychological thriller. You're just basically reading it on and on. I'm like, where is this story going? I don't get it. But then near the end, you're just like bamboozled. Is that the right word? Discombobulated, shocked. But I did give this a 3.5. This book had like a deeper meaning. Also talks about mental health. Both the characters in here were dealing with a lot of things, and it's just a lot to think about. Let me put it at that. The next book I read was Throne of Glass. If you don't already know what this book is about, which I don't know why you wouldn't know what this book is about, everyone is talking about it all over the internet. And in short, it's basically about Selena Sardothian, who is the greatest assassin in the world, but she's 16, so it kind of follows her journey and struggles throughout this book, and I gave this a 4.5 stars. I definitely loved the romance in here a lot. There was like a love triangle, and I just loved that and ate it up. That's all I can say about this book. It was really good. And the ending, you know how the last 100 pages of Sarah J Maas's books are, and yeah. The next book I read is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is a science romance. So this is about Olive and Adam. Olive is a third-year PhD student, and Adam is a young hotshot professor and a well-known ass. So it starts off as Olive kind of convincing her best friend Anne that she's doing well and she's starting to date again, blah 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 blah, because there's a situation with Anne and her ex-boyfriend, and she's just like, yeah, be together, it's okay. She does this thing. She kisses the first man within her reach to convince her friend that she's totally okay, and that man was Adam Carlson. After that kiss, they basically agreed to fake date because it was both convenient for both of them. Olive with her situation with her friend, and Adam with his career. But then you know how stories like this go, they fake date and, you know, sparks fly, but then also there is a lot of conflict with both of them. I rated it at 4.5 stars because the chemistry between Adam and Olive were so good. The next two books I read, this is part of the Shatter Me series. Second book, Unravel Me, and the two novellas, which is Destroy Me and Fracture Me, in this little book called Unite Me. The first novella, Destroy Me, was in Warner's point of view. Give it a 3 stars. Nothing much was going on there. And Fracture Me was in Adam's point of view, and I gave it like a 1 star because I do not love Adam anymore. Unravel Me, as I said, is the second book in the Shatter Me series. I gave this a 4 stars because I loved Warner in this. Daisy Hates by Jesse Hastings. This is the second book in the Magnolia Park series or universe, and as you can see, I did not finish it. I DNF'd it halfway in. I don't know, it was just not doing it for me while I was reading it, but I'm not gonna read it. I'm gonna come back to it whenever I feel like it again, because a lot of people said that they liked Daisy's story more than Magnolia's story, and I absolutely loved Magnolia Parks. I gave it a 5 stars. The next book I read is Never Lie by Rita McFadden. I read this on my Kindle, so I don't have the physical copy of it. It's about newlyweds Trisha and Ethan. They're searching for their dream house to settle in and have their family and stuff like that, and then they stumble upon a house far away out of town, and they figure out that the house belonged to Dr. Adrian Hale, who is a renowned psychiatrist who disappeared years ago. They're basically trapped in this house because of a winter storm that prevents them from driving back home. While Trisha is looking for a book to read, she accidentally stumbles upon a secret room where Dr. Hale keeps all of the recordings of the appointments she had with all her patients, and she decides to listen to them, which is probably not a good idea, but she learns the events leading up to Dr. Hale's disappearance. This book like really got me. It really did get me because I was suspecting one character the whole time because of all the red flags that they were showing, but I was wrong. I was completely wrong. It was shocked to find out that it was this character. I did not suspect that character one bit until the book told me. I rated it a 3 stars. I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. And the last book I read in April is Varity. This one, I still think about it to this day. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what's true and what's false. I gave this book, I think, a 4 stars. I think this is my favorite book out of all the Colleen Hoover books. This is about Lowen. She is a struggling writer, but she ends up landing this job to write a book for a very popular author named Varity. She is hired, I think, to write her last few books or her last book, I don't know. In order to do that, she has to go through her office, and her office is at her house, so she spends a little bit of time there with Varity. And Varity is not well. She is bedbound. She can't talk, she can't speak, she can't do anything for herself because she suffered a traumatic injury, brain injury, after an accident she had, and she ends up getting closer to the husband, Jeremy. But the closer she gets, the more things kind of come into light about Varity in her life, because she finds a manuscript, and it was disturbing, very disturbing. I don't even know what to say about this book because I still don't know what really happened at the end. 4 stars. In the month of May, I only read 3 books. It was a tough month. I think I was finishing my exams and then also moving in, moving out, and starting my preceptor. It was just a lot. I didn't have much time to read. The first book I read in May is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I was actually super excited to read this because just the description of it alone was just so intriguing and interesting for me. If you don't already know, this book is about 2 characters named Alex and Josie. Alex and Josie are birthday twins. They are out celebrating their 44th birthday, and they end up crossing paths. Alex runs this famous podcast that everyone loves, and Josie kind of poses an idea of letting her be on the podcast and be interviewed because she feels that her life is about to change and all that, and she thought that Alex's podcast would too kind of tell her story and let everyone know. I rated this book a 3 stars. It really bumped me out because there was a lot of hype around this book. I love thrillers, but it just didn't do much for me. It was kind of a slow burn. It was very creepy. Like, it gave Joe vibes from You. There's a lot of stalking and weird keeping of things. This is a type of book that you know what's gonna happen at the end. It's very predictable. It's a slow burn. It's not the type of book that will surprise you with the ending. The ending was kind of meh, and I don't know. It's like Varity. I don't know which side to believe, essentially. I read the next 2 books, which is Crown of Midnight and Hair of Fire. This book has been my favorite so far. I gave this a 4.5 stars or 4.7 stars. I didn't quite give it a 5 star or 6 star because honestly, there's a lot of world building and politics in this book. I didn't really care about that part. I only cared about Kale, and the ending had me gagged. I did not see that coming, and it was so good. 4.5 stars. I don't want to say more. I don't want to ruin the series. Terrifier, I gave a 4 stars just because there's still a lot of world building and politics involved in this. I feel like I'm never gonna get away from the politics because there's big war that's about to happen. This one has multiple POVs. It has Selena, Dorian, Kale still, but then it introduces new characters. There is Rowan and Maman. The only thing I don't like about these books is that it doesn't tell you whose POV you're in. You just kind of guess. This one was a little bit slower for me. Like there's a lot of training and all that, and I felt like it was just kind of like a repeat of Crown of Midnight's and Throne of Glass, because Santa's in this new place and she trains with a cute guy, and then there's feelings, and yeah, I'm still Team Kale all the way. 4 stars, the ending. It was good too, you know, the last 100 pages, more action there, and the ending didn't really like shock me like Crown of Midnight's. On to the next pile. These are the books that I read in June. I read 10 books in the month of June, 8 romance books, and 2 thrillers. The first book that I read, it was on my Kindle. It was part of like the Meet Cute series that Amazon did with a bunch of authors. I read With Any Luck by Ashley Poston. I think the books in this series is meant to be read in one sitting. It's very short and fast paced, and it basically ends after the meet cute happens. This little story is about Aubrey, who is said to be cursed because every time she kisses a guy, that guy finds their soulmate the next day. She is basically the best man in her best friend's wedding. She planned the bachelor party, but things kind of happen during that night and the best friend disappears hours before his wedding. She tries hard to remember what happened. She fears that she might have kissed him and fled because of a curse, and that's basically the story. I gave it a 3 stars. The next 3 books that I read were part of a video that I found of reading sad books. First one was If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowlin. This book had a lot of hype on the internet. People were saying that they were bawling and they just loved it. And I did cry. This book is about Autumn and Finn. They grew up together. Their moms are best friends. They lived next to each other, so they were basically inseparable. But then something changed, and when they got to high school, they kind of parted their own ways because they were living different worlds. Autumn was described as a misfit and hung around people who were also considered misfits, and Finn was this popular jock who hung out with those popular people. He was basically that boy. Autumn ends up getting a boyfriend in high school, but then her thoughts linger around what if she was meant to be with Finn, and like unresolved feelings and stuff like that. That's all I'll say. I'm very bad at explaining things. She tries to make it right, but she thinks it's too late. I gave this a 3.5 stars because it did make me sad. It was good, but the ending just was like, what? That's it? It was very abrupt and it just ended there. It felt incomplete. I felt like it needed more, but I guess there's a second book that came out, so I might read that. Okay, the next book that I read is A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. I also read this on my Kindle. This book is about Poppy and Brune. They met when they were 5 years old, I think, and Brune was this grumpy little kid who didn't want anything to do with anyone because they recently moved away from Norway to Georgia because of the dad's job, and he was just grumpy because he wanted to go back home to Norway to his friends and his life there until he met Poppy. Poppy is just this bright little charismatic girl who's always optimistic, and she captures Brune's attention from the very start. From then they were basically inseparable. They were best of friends. They always went on adventures like we all did when we were little. But then Poppy's grandma passed away, but before she passed away, she gave her one last adventure. She gave her a jar full of empty paper hearts to write her kisses that made her extra special from the love of her life, and Rune was not a big fan of it because he didn't want another boy kissing her, so he decides to be that one guy for her. But then Rune and his family has to move away back to Norway because of the dad's job, and it was just not great for them. They tried to keep in contact with each other through texting and all that, but then Poppy decides to cut their communication. 2 years later, Rune moves back and he's not the same person as he was. He's obviously mad at Poppy for just cutting him off, but Poppy had a good reason. It said that he would be more heartbroken to know the truth of why she did that, and it was all for Rune's best interest. This book was so sad. It was actually so sad. It's predictable from the very start. It was so sad. It made me cry. If you want to see me cry, go watch that video. I ended up giving that book a 3 stars just because some parts were slow, things were predictable. The next book I read was The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith, and this book, I didn't have a rating. I didn't know how to rate this book, so I just left it with no rating. But this book is about Eden, who faces a very traumatic event. But it's in simpler words, she was basically our RIPED by her brother's best friend, and obviously she kept her mouth shut and didn't tell anyone. This book is told in 4 parts: her freshman year, sophomore, junior, and senior year, and it just kind of shows the effects of what trauma can do to someone's life and all the other aspects of their life and relationships. Obviously she was going through this and no one knew, shouldn't tell anyone, and just life went downhill from there. Everything she loved she now hated. I felt like she didn't have any motivations to really live her life to the fullest anymore and try to fulfill her dreams. This is the first book that I annotated a lot. If you are someone who is sensitive about these types of topics, maybe just look into it. Look at the trigger warnings because it does start very abruptly. It tells you really at the first page what happens. The next book I read was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and I'm gonna start by saying that I gave this book a 6 stars. It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. Abby Jimenez is definitely one of my most favorite authors right now. This is the first book in the Part of Your World series. It goes this book, Yours Truly, and the new one that just came out just for the summer, I think. This book is about Alexis and Daniel. Alexis is this very affluent and intelligent girl who grew up in a very sophisticated family. She comes from a line of physicians. Her mom, her dad, grandparents, they were all physicians, and she herself is a emergency physician. Daniel, on the other hand, is this small town guy. He is described as a ridiculously hot carpenter who's 10 years younger than her. I think this is the first age gap romance that I read where the guy is younger than the female main character. And basically, Alexis got herself in a rut. She drove her vehicle into a ditch and Daniel came to save her, and things kind of spiral on from there. That night they ended up having a one-night stand. She wakes up and realizes this was all a mistake and runs back to the city. But then there's just this tug that she feels that she needs to see Daniel again, so she does just that. They start this thing. They're not really dating. She doesn't want any commitment or any titles because she just came out of a very traumatic and abusive relationship, so she doesn't want any commitment and all that. Daniel is like all in for it. He doesn't care if she's older, he just wants to be with her. But then since they're from completely different worlds, she just thinks that it's not gonna work out and all that. There's a lot of conflict in the book, and her family has very high expectations of what she does and who she dates, so you can already tell what the conflict is. But this book was so good. I was laughing. This book was so funny. I was laughing out loud. And the little goat right here, Chloe, loved her as well. You just need to read this book. It's so amazing. The next book that I read was The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This book is a murder mystery. I'll just read what the back says. An exclusive wedding on a remote Irish island. The bride, the +1, the best man, the wedding planner, the bridesmaid. All have a secret, all have a motive, but only one is a murderer. It is told in the past and present tense and in the POVs of the different characters. I found this book a little bit slow throughout the whole book except for like the last 50 or 60 pages. There was really nothing special about it. It didn't really intrigue me. I gave this book a 3.5 stars. I did not see the ending coming. It's always the character that you least expect it to be. That's all I'll say. The next book was Betting on You by Lynn Painter. This was such a cutesy little YA rom-com. This is about Bailey and Charlie. Hated each other at first. I'm guessing this is like an enemies to lovers. They both first met each other on a flight back home after the summer holidays. Bailey describes the flight back home to be the worst flight she's ever had, sitting next to Charlie. She describes him as a cynical and obnoxiously opinionated stranger, the polar opposite of herself, a well-behaved, cheery temperament. But then they meet each other years later. They found out that they're working at the same place, so they're co-workers. Charlie has this ongoing belief that female and male cannot just be friends. There's more to it, and she and Charlie places a bet on it because there's some workplace romance between her best friend and Charlie's male friend. But then on top of that, there's a lot more things going on. Their separate lives. Both their parents are divorced, so they kind of bond through that shared trauma that they have. And Bailey's not a fan of her mom's new boyfriend, so she asks Charlie for help. During that, they basically fake date, and it's like fake dating of convenience. They both benefit from it. And things kind of get out of hand and they start getting feelings for each other. But then it says here, but Charlie has a secret that involves Bailey and another bet Charlie may have made. Can the two make a real go at things, or has Charlie's secret doomed them before they can even start? I feel like I just told the whole story, but I gave this book a 4 stars. It was very fast paced and the chapters were short, so I love that. I absolutely love this book. I felt every emotion reading it. I was laughing, crying, giddy, all that stuff. If you don't already know about this series, the series is about Pip, who solves a whole bunch of mysteries. In this book, she is running a podcast about a mystery she solved in the past book, and in this book there's a new mystery that arises. Jamie, a brother of a friend at her school, disappears and the police isn't doing anything about it, so she tries and solve it. This book was very heartbreaking. The ending was so heartbreaking, but other than that, it was fast-paced. It grabbed my attention right away. It was just so good. So if you haven't read this series, please do. I gave this a 6 stars. The next book I also gave a 6 star, and it's by Abby Millis. I'm not even surprised because I loved the last book. This is the second book in the Part of Your World series, and this is Yours Truly. This one is a lot more popular than that previous book, but this book is about Dr. Brianna Ortiz and Dr. Jacob Maddox. They're both doctors. It's a medical love story. Brianna is the best friend in Part of Your World, so I definitely recommend you reading the series in order because the characters from that book shows up in this book, and I feel like from what I've read in this book about those two characters, it's gonna spoil Part of Your World. So just recommendation. I heard you don't have to read it in order, but I feel like that's the best way to read them. Dr. Brianna is not having a great time. She is going through a divorce right now. She's taking care of her brother who is basically very sick. He's on dialysis and he's looking for a kidney donor. Haven't had much luck yet. And then she's also stressed out about a job she wants in the ER, but then Dr. Jacob Maddox comes in. He's a transfer from another hospital, and he's also a candidate for that job that she wants and doesn't like that. When they first met, it wasn't a good first impression. Dr. Maddox, I love him. He's such a sweetheart. He has anxiety, like very bad anxiety, and he just felt that he's messed up with Dr. Brianna at the very start because he's just very anxious being in a new environment, being around new people, and people not liking him. And so as a solution, he started writing notes to Dr. Brianna to just kind of let him tell her how she feels in the proper words, and it's just so sweet. I loved when they were writing notes to each other. It's such a dream. I also love how in this book it depicts like men's mental health. I feel like that's a topic that we don't see a lot, and in the real world too. I feel like it's a topic that we don't really talk about that much. The next book is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This I actually was skeptical about reading this book because the last book I read by him was The House Across the Lake, and I didn't really like that one. So this is his second chance of grabbing my attention, proving to me that maybe that one was just a fluke. I gave this book a 3 stars. It was okay. Like, I liked it better than The House Across the Lake, definitely. In this book, I'm just gonna read you a little blurb of what it's about. At 17, Lenora Hope hung her sister with a rope, stabbed her father with a knife, took her mother's happy life. It wasn't me, Lenora said, but she was the only one not dead. That's like the little rhyme that comes up in the book so much. The main character in here is Kit. She is a care aide, and she was hired to take care of Lenora Hope. And she did not take it lightly because Lenora Hope did not have a good reputation in the city or town that she lives in. Everyone hated her because everyone accused her of killing everyone in her family. And she was nervous about it and all that. Once she got there, Lenora is basically this little frail lady who's in her 70s who is paralyzed but her left hand works, and the only form of communication they have was a typewriter that she got. And then one night Lenora tells Kit that she wants to tell her everything, and things just unfold from there. This book had a lot of plot twist and I loved that. It was crazy. That's all I'll say about it. The ending was okay. It's just the plot twist was like, what? I was just like, what am I reading? And we're finally on to the last book. The last book is Twisted Games by Anna Huang. This is the second book in the Twisted Love series. This one follows Reese and Bridget. Bridget is a princess of a little place in Europe called Eldor, I think so. And Reese is her new bodyguard. He is described as a stoic, broody, and arrogant bodyguard. He has true rules basically to protect his clients and not become emotionally involved ever. But you know, all those rules are thrown out the window because Reese just sees something differently with Bridget. He is though like 10 years older than her, so this is another age gap romance. Bridget is not a fan of Reese because he's just like too overprotective and doesn't let her do some of the things that she wants. She is living in the US right now, so Reese has to live in with her and keep her safe 24/7. But then her grandpa had a health scare and she flew back to Eldoran. But then when she gets there, she finds out more news that her brother, who is the next in line for the throne, abdicates. So now she is left with this heavy responsibility of training to be the next queen for this small little country, when all she wanted was just freedom from her royal responsibilities. Like, being a princess for her was already too much, and now she's becoming queen. As she like kind of navigates and trains to become the next queen, she develops some feelings for her bodyguard, and things kind of get out of hand. She could never be with him because the royal law says that she has to marry someone of noble blood, and Reese is not that. So that's the big conflict. And I loved this book. I love this way better than the first book, which is Twisted Love. I feel like I was just more connected to the characters, and just seeing the character development was so good. I loved it. It just made them more like real people, if you know what I mean. I gave this a 4.5 stars. The reason why I didn't give it a 5 stars, I would have given it 5 stars. It's just the spice sometimes were a little too much. That was also like not a problem. Something I disliked in the first book, that the spice was a lot, but some of the times I didn't mind it because I loved the characters and I was rooting for them. But yeah, there's just little moments where I feel like they both got carried away. Anyways, that brings us to the end of this video. In total, I read this many books. I don't know why. I don't know how much. I'm just gonna put it up on the screen because I don't want to count right now. I'm very tired. That was a lot of talking. I feel like that was a successful 3 months of reading, even though May was a little bit off. Only read 3 books, but you know, we all have those days where we just can't pick up a book. Anyways, if you stayed this long into the video, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed, and maybe give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, maybe. Anyways, I hope I see you guys in another video.